Dear colleagues, dear partners, hello, bonjour, grüezi, and buongiorno. We at the Data Science Competence Center of the Swiss Federal Statistical Office are very happy to welcome you to our webinar series, Data Science and AI for Public Good. My name is Kirsten Johnson-Baker. I head the Competence Network for AI unit, and I now hand over to my dear colleague, Yara.
Hello, everyone. My name is Yara Abu Awad. I'm a senior data scientist at the Data Science Competence Center, and I will be your moderator today. If you want to submit questions to the speaker, please use the Mentimeter link that you received in the invitation, which you can also find in the description box of the YouTube video that you are currently watching. We're thrilled to have Dr. Marco Zaffalon with us today, who will provide an overview of AI and its recent successes and discuss their relation to the question of whether AI should just predict or understand in his presentation entitled Predicting or Understanding the AI Dilemma and its Relevance to AI for Good. Dr. Marco Zaffalon is a university professor and scientific director at the Dalle, Molle Institute for AI in Lugano. He has 160 refereed publications on artificial intelligence and machine learning, and his research has overall been supported by 15 million francs in competitive grants. Marco is a senior area editor of the International Journal of Approximate Reasoning, as well as senior program committee member for AI conferences and associations, and is listed as a top 2% scientist according to Stanford's science-wide author databases of standardized citation indicators. At IDSIA, Marco founded the group on probabilistic machine learning that has grown to 40 researchers. In his applied research, he has worked with several companies such as UBS, Novartis, and MasterCard. In 2020, he co-founded Artificiale, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, Marco, a Lugano-based company for products and services in AI, where he works as the company's chief scientist. Artificiale currently employs 20 people. Dr. Zaffalon, thanks again for being with us today, and the floor is yours.
Well, first, thank you very much, in particular to Kirsty and Yara for inviting me to speak. I should share my screen now, but I should have privileges to be the owner, I think, of the chat, because at the moment I cannot do screen sharing. If you pass the privileges to me. Yeah, I should become host, I guess.
Please hold for technical difficulties.
Yeah, and just we tried before.
We are trying to solve this.
Okay, now I am co-host, so it should work. Okay, yes, I'm about to share my slides. I hope you see them. Can you see?
Yes.
Cool. Okay, so as I was saying, thanks everybody for being here. As Yara was saying, I'm scientific director of IDSIA and Artificiale. I'm based in Lugano. Here you can have an overview of Lugano. So maybe you are willing to come and to visit us at some point. And in particular, I work at IDSIA, which is this institute in Lugano for AI. It was founded in '88, long ago, thanks to this nice guy, Angelo Dalle Molle, from which we take the name, Dalle Molle Institute. And Angelo Dalle Molle was an entrepreneur in Italy, was actually the owner of Amaro Cinaso, this bitter liquor that you see here. And eventually, this was also a philanthropist. When he sold the company, he used part of the money to found scientific institutes in AI, and in particular in Switzerland, and we are one of them. Eventually, all these institutes became part of university, and at the moment, we are in particular at IDSIA, 134 people, as you see, with a number of professors, researchers, PhD students, and so. What do we do? In particular, in 2022, as you can see, we have done a number of things, publishing paper, getting some millions of francs from competitive grants to support ourselves. We've been teaching courses, working on applied research projects, and of course, publishing a number of papers. We teach at all the levels, bachelor, master, and the PhD. Okay, but I'd like to introduce what the topic is artificial intelligence. I'm sure that lots of you know what artificial intelligence is. I just do a small overview. AI has this idea that it is a discipline that should help computers to learn to solve problems. And to solve problems in general sense, not just a specific problem, but the very idea of the problem. And to do this, AI takes inspiration from the way we work, humans, but also other animals. AI is a big container. It's not only machine learning, as you can see here. For instance, in this part, for instance, of the container, there is not learning. There is, for instance, smart search, intelligent search, when you have, for instance, to explore the many solutions of a chess game, exploring the tree of possible solutions. Then you have to search this tree smartly, and this kind of activity is done in the upper part of the container. If we go inside the container, then a subset of artificial intelligence is called machine learning, which means learning from data. And if you go still inside this subset, so you go into a very specialized area of machine learning, which is called deep learning, which is also the brightest part of artificial intelligence recently, which is based on neural networks. AI has made a huge progress since 2012, more or less, so about 10 years ago. And the reason why this happened is not so much about theory, but about engineering in a sense. So, the algorithms that we're using now are not so different from the algorithms that people used in the 90s or at the beginning of the century. What changed is actually the development of computing power, in particular the availability of graphical processing units, GPUs, on which we can train neural networks that are very powerful. And on the other end, the availability of lots of data that are available in the internet with images and texts and so on and so forth. So the acceleration of AI has been due essentially to engineering elements, not so much about theory. Theory is more or less what was there before. Years ago, Google realized that this was a business and started saying, for instance, we are an AI company, and this was not what it was saying before, because Google in the past was just a company that was handling the search engine. But then they said, okay, we are an AI company, and they started inserting AI in all their products. And they have been doing a lot of nice things. For instance, a few years ago, they developed this AlphaZero chess program that learned to play chess in 4 hours, starting from scratch, in the sense that it didn't check the previous matches by human champions, just playing against the computer against itself. In 4 hours, it was able to beat all the previous, learn and beat all the previous chess programs. And then this was obtained, as I was saying before, through deep learning. So what is deep learning? If you run a neural network, you would see something like this. So in this case, for instance, you would like to recognize the dog that is hiding here in the basket. Then what you do is to insert this picture into a layer of artificial neurons. It is everything simulated in software. It's not hardware, actually. So you insert the picture bit by bit in each single neuron. And then these neurons, some of them or all of them, just fire and propagate the signal to the upper layer. Then the upper layer in turn propagates the signal to the upper layer, and so on and so forth, until you get to the last layer of neurons. And there are 2 neurons there, one for cat, one for dog. If the dog neuron fires, then the classification is correct. So there is this propagation of signals through the layers of a neural network. So this is a neural network that is running. This is the execution of the neural network, but how does the neural network learn to do the learning? It is something like this. So you start with a neural network that you see drafted below here. In the input layer, as I was saying before, you insert one of the images, and then there is a propagation of the signals that reaches the output layer. And for instance, let's say that this is the neuron that fires in the end, and this neuron, let's say, is associated to sheep. So if you insert the picture of a dog and then this neuron fires, then there is a mismatch because we are saying that it is a sheep. And at that point, we tell the neural network, no, look, this is not a sheep, this is a dog. And the neural network takes into account this mistake by, in a sense, backpropagating the error and altering, so changing the strength by which the neurons are related through synapses. And in this way, they try to match input and output by adjusting the strength of the synapses. So you do that another time, and then you correct the network. You do that another time. You do that a million times, and in the end, with different images, and in the end, the network adapts so well to the images that it will be able to match exactly the animal in the picture or what is in the picture. The nice part of this learning is that it is not memorizing the images, it is abstracting the concept of the animal in this case. Because if you insert the picture of a new dog that was not in the training images, that is maybe a dog of another race with a new color, with a rotated face or different background, still the network should say dog. And this is because it is abstracting the concept of the dog. And this abstraction happens through the internal layers of the network. Because implicitly the network in the first layer, for instance, finds out the segments of the picture. In the second layer, connects the segments to determine, the face of the dog, the tree, the grass, and so on and so forth. And in the end, the last layer tries to match it to the different animals that is refined in the output layer. So the more inner layer you have, the more you are able to represent sophisticated concepts. And this is the reason why people at some point try to use many internal layers, because then you get a very fine hierarchical representation of your concept, for very basic at the beginning to high-level concepts of animals in the end. So inserting more internal layers is good in principle, and this determines the depth of the neural network, because the more inner layer, the more deep the neural network it is. On the other hand, it requires much more computing power to train the neural network. So the point is that before 2012, essentially, we were not able to train very big neural networks for computing power limitations, but now we can, and this is the reason of one of the main reasons of the explosion of the use of AI that we are witnessing nowadays. Okay, this is something that we did in 2016. I think so. It's an old video, but it is still nice to see how it was made. So we sent one of our PhD students around the woods in Lugano here with 3 GoPro cameras in his helmet. And these were recording the scenes from 3 different angles. Then we use these clips to feed a neural network to have the neural network learn automatically from the videos and the directions taken by our researcher, learn automatically how to stay in the trail. So we put the neural network on top of the drone that you are seeing, and the drone is flying completely autonomously. No one is controlling the drone. And it is trying to follow the trail just by looking through a single camera. The drone sees this big picture every time, and every time it has to decide where to go, left, ahead, or right, as you can see here. And so the drone takes continuously this decision based on the learning that he has done on the video clips recorded by our researcher. So this kind of thing, before deep neural networks, it would have been very difficult to do, because we would have had to instruct the drone to do these things ourselves. So like, this is the grass, this is the tree, there is the sun, stay in between these 2 lines and try not to crash on a tree. Instead, after deep neural networks, we just gave the video clips in input to the neural network, and the neural network learned by itself how to take this decision successfully. And this was one of the first applications that we had. It had a lot of success, but it was a nice research application at that point. But now, with the instruments that we have just after a few years, any, let's say, master student can do this just autonomously, just to tell you what is the advancement in a few years. Same neural networks, we have been using them to recognize road signs, or to recognize cancer cells, for instance, in this case, in mammalian human tissue. So the neural network has to circle the cancer cells that suspected to be cancer cells. And again, in this case, and as in the previous case of traffic signs, we had a performance that was superior to that of the doctor. So if the doctor in this case was having an accuracy of, let's say, 80%, the neural network would have an accuracy of 85%. So on specific vertical tasks, these neural networks are so-called superhuman, in the sense that they're able to do things that we cannot, because we cannot see all these patterns with our eyes. And for these reasons, at some point, Google got interested into us, and they started introducing one of our neural networks, which is called LSTM, long short-term memory, into Google Voice. So if you have an Android phone, the voice recognition system is based on neural networks. But then, for instance, also one of our PhD students Cheng Leg that you see here in the picture. He was doing the PhD with us for 4 years, and then eventually went to London and co-founded with 2 friends DeepMind, and DeepMind was sold to Google for $500 million, so $500 million in 2014. And he is still the chief scientist of DeepMind. At the moment, DeepMind, is the biggest AI company in the world with more than 1,000 researchers, wonderful salaries, and great research that is produced by them. For this reason, for instance, again, around those years, 2016, as you can see here, this is our symbol. It was awarded the prize by the CEO of NVIDIA, together with much bigger institutions, for being one of the pioneers in AI. So you see University of Oxford, New York, MIT, Qatar, Carnegie Mellon, Berkeley, Stanford, University of Montreal, and essentially in Europe only Oxford and IDSIA, which was, of course, very, very nice to us. And then eventually many companies started using LSTM, and LSTM, I think it's not only the most cited neural network at the moment in the world, but also the most used in the business by all the big players, essentially, big business players. Other than this, we have been doing just by our nature, because we were also part of a Fachhochschule, so an applied university, not only just a university, but also an applied university. We do much applied work just to sustain ourselves, and also because we like it. So we have been working for 5 years now with UBS. UBS has established a center just close by here, like 5 kilometers from here in Manno, to do advanced analytics and AI, and they explicitly said also to work with us. And in fact, since 2018, we have been doing many projects with them every year, like 6, 7 multi-month projects with them every year. Okay, we have been working with God Fisher in the case, for instance, of electrical discharge machining. They have these big machines here that, for instance, are used to make holes in airplane turbines, as this one, to cool down the turbine. And these machines are very difficult to use, and this is a barrier to sell them in markets where there are not expert operators. And then what we did was we inserted some intelligence into the machine in such a way that the machine now is able to configure itself automatically by doing some attempts. So it's like a guided search in the space of possible recipes for making the production as good as possible. The machine does that in like 20 or 30 attempts to make a hole, for instance, in this case, and eventually the hole has the same quality of the human operator, and it is actually done quicker, 1 second less, so 5 seconds instead of 6. And this is a lot since they have to do billions of holes in the current decade. We have been working also, we are still working with Bystronic, which is in the Bern canton. They produce laser cutting machines, as you can see here. The problem is essentially the same. These machines are very complicated, and if they want to sell it, for instance, in China, these machines should be able to configure themselves automatically. And also in this case, we have used our AI to have this done. And actually, this is a product that is sold together with the machine at the moment. Delvitech is a company here in Mendrisio, close to Lugano. And in this case, there are neural networks that you can see are lighting up components of an electric board. So the neural networks through a camera is checking that the components have been mounted on the board correctly, and there are no missing pieces, everything is in place, and so on. Something that had to be done manually before, it was very, very slow. Now there is a neural network that does this check almost entirely, and the production, of course, has accelerated a lot. Okay, a few more. We are working with Leonardo, which is was part of Finmeccanica in Italy, so it is the biggest producer of helicopters and airplanes in Italy, and with them we were working to analyze the process of designing new helicopters by analyzing all the sensors, the data that are produced by all the sensors while there are these trial flights. And finally, we work with Arma Suisse since a long time, since 2006. I guess you might know, Arma Suisse is the agency of the Confederation that buys technology for the militaries. And in this case, you see a war game that was already present at Arma Suisse, by which their soldiers train on some specific warfare situation. In this case, we have produced an autonomous player that plays against people just to train them better. Okay, so this is a relatively fast introduction to IDSIA. Then I would like to talk a bit more about AI and the accelerating pace of AI of the recent years. if you see what the DeepMind was doing in 2006, this was something like this. This was published in Nature in 2016, sorry. You see a neural network that is learning to play Breakthrough, this game, a game from the 70s. And the cool thing here is that the neural network knows nothing about this game, and not even that the bar below is the network itself, that there is a ball, that there is a wall to destroy. The neural network only knows that there are 2 buttons to push, and that it has to increase the score. And the only input given to the neural network is the video or the screen of the game. So the lowest possible form of input, just the screen in a bitmap form. And just the network playing against a video game many times, trying to maximize the score after 600 games, as you see, it plays like this. So, you know, starting from scratch, not even knowing the rules of the game, not even knowing what is the meaning of the game. You know, there is a wall, there is a ball, and it knows nothing. But you see that now it is playing like a kid, essentially, very, very well. And this was done with many other games of the 70s, and that was the reason why eventually they published in Nature, because it was very surprising at the time. But then what happens after, you know, 8 years, 9 years, so 8 years actually, 2022, you know, still DeepMind in Nature again, they showed that now the champion of Gran Turismo, this video game, is an artificial intelligence. So there is a car now that is guided by an artificial intelligence, is driven by an artificial intelligence, and it is essentially very difficult to beat because it is a champion of Gran Turismo. So you can imagine that the space of configurations in this game is huge compared to the previous Breakthrough game. And therefore, you know, this gives you an idea of the feeling of the progress that has been done in the recent years. But still many people would say, okay, but these are just games, right? Even though maybe this is realistic and say something, but these are just games. So let me show you some more applications. Actually, you know, just one more slide about this. You can download the game now with the AI player, so you can really try it yourself. Okay, so what are the other applications? For instance, this is a simulation of the protein that is folding. So as you might know, a protein is a sequence of amino acids, and for physical reasons, if you let the protein be sequenced there by itself, it will fold in a 3D structure. This process called the protein folding and the protein folding problem are very important things to address, because in biology, the shape, the 3D shape of the protein is the function of the protein. So for instance, there could be a shape such that the protein acts like a spring. Otherwise, there can be a shape for a protein to act like a hook and just to hook our cells, like in the spike protein of COVID. Therefore, if we know the shape, we know what they do, we know how we can find them. And unfortunately, solving this problem was very complicated. It was kind of holy grail of biology for 50 years, until in 2020, DeepMind did AlphaFold, this software, this neural network that takes an input, a protein sequence here, and outputs this 3D representation, you know, prediction of the folding of the protein. And this was very accurate, much more accurate than all we could do before. And in fact, as you can read, many people working in the field were totally upset by the result that they were expecting much later in the future. So this is going to be super important for us, for our health, for the reason that biologists need to know, you know, the shape of the proteins to do their work better, to invent new medicines, to fight diseases, to fight COVID, and so on and so forth. So if we have this tool, we can hope to understand much better biology than we can now. And actually, DeepMind released this prediction of all the known proteins for free. So this means that all our 20,000 proteins that we express as in our bodies have a predicted structure, but also all the other million ones that are available in nature. Then they also showed that they can do very good weather prediction in the special case of nowcasting, where you try to predict what's going to, where it is going to rain in the next half an hour, which is usually a very difficult problem. And again, by looking at the clouds from the satellite, a neural network was able to make the prediction very well. And then, for instance, that at Meteo Suisse, they are trying to use these systems and to work on top of these systems to improve their prediction. So it's not really academic, this thing, but it's something that has a very practical impact in our life. And then, okay, they also try to control the plasma and nuclear reactor, and since they are doing that better than we can do, and many other things. And then, of course, there is all the work done to create images with AI. This is, I think this is Microsoft. I don't think it is DeepMind. In this case, what you do is called Dream Boost. You take, for instance, pictures of your dog, like 4 or 5 pictures, And then by some prompts, you write, okay, put the dog in the Acropolis, make the dog swim, sleep, have an haircut, and so on. And the AI will automatically, adapt the original pictures that you gave of your dog and create the scene that you're describing by text. Similarly here with the teapot. So you have high quality images starting from some picture of yours that can produce a lot of new images out of the blue through AI. You probably know about Midjourney. Midjourney is creating images in very high quality resolutions. It's very, very good by textual prompts. So in this case, you see, retro urban photography in China made by Midjourney. So these are completely fake pictures, but as you see, very high quality, very indistinguishable. And if you look also at the fingers that usually are badly represented by AI, in this case, they're represented very well. Or again, these are also fake pictures of a beautiful woman, completely artificial, made by Midjourney. And then, of course, there is ChatGPT. I'm not going to tell you much about ChatGPT because I'm sure that you already used that, try to do that a number of things. The colleagues or the mates of my daughter at school are using that to try to improve their skills without letting teachers know that, and teachers don't seem to realize that apart from the increased higher quality of the home assignments. So ChatGPT is this wonderful neural network that talks, you can have a conversation, also a lot of things, and so on and so forth. Maybe something that you don't know is that they try to use also this kind of technology to improve game playing. Because, when we learn to play a game, cards or video game or something, it's not bad to read the manual usually, because you have an idea of the strategies to employ and so on. So instead of having just the computer play against itself lots of times, you can also, in this case, have ChatGPT read the manual of the instruction, extract useful information, and use this useful information to guide potentially better strategies than those that you have at the beginning when you play randomly. Okay, by doing this, so reading the manual, they show that you can improve by 6,000 times the speed at which this AI learns to play the game, which is, not surprising in the sense that, of course, you should read the manual, but before we couldn't read we could not read the manual, but now we can. Okay, so these amazing capabilities of ChatGPT, GPT-4, led some people to start talking about artificial general intelligence, AGI. AGI is, in a sense, the equivalence of our intelligence. So an intelligence that is not able to solve a very vertical tasks in a single domain, but to be very broad, so to be good at doing anything essentially, more or less in the way we do, which is also a bit scary. So some people, for instance, at Microsoft, in a very recent paper, they titled that Sparks of AGI because of GPT-4. So they said, okay, look, GPT-4 is showing signs of AGI that were not available before. And in this very long paper, they do a number of tests for GPT-4 and ChatGPT to see how they work in many different domains. For instance, in this case, they asked, okay, write a proof that there are infinitely many prime numbers, but in rhyme. And this is the output. Or even maybe more scary, they said, okay, you have a book, 9 eggs, a laptop, a bottle, and a nail. Please tell me how to stack them onto each other in a stable manner. And GPT-4, among the other things, say, okay, arrange the 9 eggs in 3 by 3 and on top of the book, and then leave some space between them, and then, okay, it essentially describes the way in which you can stack all these things stably, which is not trivial at all, right, for a computer. Or here below, you can see a conversation between two people, Mark and Judy. They are quarreling, and eventually they ask GPT and also GPT-4, ChatGPT and GPT-4 to see the difference between them, to make a summary of the situation. If you see what the GPT-4 is writing here, it is showing very clear signs of good sense because it is summarizing what happened between Mark and Judy in the conversation. So of course, there seems to be signs of general artificial intelligence. Is it true? Is it not true? Should we be worried or not? Here, for instance, what we have is a bit of a comparison of GPT and GPT-4 on a number of tasks. Sorry, I go back. On a number of tasks that are, tests, verbal tests, evidence-based writing, law exam, math exam, and other law exam, biology exam, and so on and so forth, up to advanced calculus, English literature, and competitive programming. And you see here, ChatGPT was in the 63 percentile. This means, well, of course, well, you know that there are, 62 people that score worse, and, the other ones, so 37, 36, that score better. But if you check GPT-4, which is the blue one, there is only one person that scores better than GPT-4 in this case on the verbal test. And you see GPT-4 is quite impressive in all the quantiles that we are representing here, apart from some specific cases, which is advanced calculus, and in particular, what I find very interesting is competitive programming. So it is still not able to do programming in a very nice way, in a very smart way for difficult problems. But still, if you had a person that scores like this, it would be like, maybe not a genius, but certainly a very, very clever person. So should we worry or not about GPT-4, ChatGPT? Okay, so let me put things in this perspective. So GPT for ChatGPT are still made through deep learning, machine learning, and so on. And in spite of having many names for learning, in particular machine learning, is essentially almost all of it just pure fitting, so regression. So regression, like you are very well aware of, like a linear regression. In this case, you fit a line to fit find the trend between the hours students study and the score that they get in the end. So in this case, a line fits the trend very well. Or maybe you fit a polynomial in this case, in order to find the trend of that relates the time of the day and the cups of coffee sold at that time. Again, in this case, you fit a polynomial, a nonlinear fit. And if you take a neural network, a deep neural network, this is still pure fitting. It's just that it is very highly nonlinear and very, very high dimensional because, ChatGPT, for instance, or GPT-3 had 175 billion parameters of dimensions. So it's in a huge space, but still you are doing pure fitting. So in fact, all the very bright applications that we have had in the recent years have been achieved by creating huge models, monster models. So these super big neural networks, which are made of hundreds of billions of parameters. Is this the way to go? Is this true intelligence? For instance, researchers like Gary Marcus, co-author of this book, say no. He says, well, we should not trust AI system just based on deep learning alone for a number of reasons. And the recent tweet of Gary Marcus that I like in particular is this, very recent, the 28th of March. They said, if this is the risk of artificial general intelligence and this is the risk of AI, so normal AI, you are here, you are not in AGI. Still, there is a risk. So, but it is normal, so to say, artificial intelligence is not AGI, but still there is a risk. And Gary Marcus is saying there is a risk because, for instance, ChatGPT gives you the idea that it is super clever because it is so good at producing nice conversations, at playing with words and so on. But in the end, it doesn't know really very well things because, it is playing with words in a sense. And the risk, Gary Marcus is saying, is that we take what the guy says for true, especially, young people, students, old people, but everybody, I think that you can take GPT 3, 4, whatever, for an authority in a certain field, while in many cases, the guy is just hallucinating, so producing, interpolating by a very big imagination. I think that one of the roles probably that we will follow soon in order to make these things more reliable is to connect them with so-called plugins. And in fact, if you go to this page of OpenAI, you see that they have already created all the framework, all the setting to let ChatGPT interact with third-party applications through plugins. For instance, if you browse through the internet, you will see there is already a plugin for Wolfram Alpha, which is initially started like a math program, like Mathematica, but eventually it also became a kind of an encyclopedia. So there is all a demo that I don't show here because there is no time, but in which essentially you interact with ChatGPT in a very nice way, in a conversational way. Maybe you submit a mathematical problem and ChatGPT already starts modeling the problem in natural language, saying, okay, then I have to represent this quantity with a variable, this quantity with another variable, this quantity with a function. But when there is to do something very precise, like an integral, ChatGPT calls Wolfram Alpha that solves the integral and retrieves the result and goes on producing results. So in this case, I think ChatGPT and GPT-4 will become very, very useful because there will be a kind of general interface for lots of programs that we are using at the moment in a much more difficult way. You need to know how to program and this and that. So if the plugin is done well, we'll have like a kind of single interface for lots of different programs that solve actual tasks in a very reliable and precise way. So if this is done, then of course, the overall system, ChatGPT plus the plugins, will become very nice, very powerful. Maybe not AGI, but certainly something that can help us a lot in lots of things. Okay, so my summary so far is that these are very nice models, but especially for creative tasks at the moment. So it's the opposite that sometimes, what I'm saying is just the opposite of what sometimes you are hearing, that they are not creative. I think on just the opposite, that these guys, ChatGPT, GPT-4, are very creative because they invent new solutions. The problem is to have them do things reliably. You know, sometimes I heard this phrase, you know, that from a famous writer. He said, you know, write drunk and edit sober. So in a sense, GPT-4 is writing drunk at the moment, and we are missing the guy that is editing sober. And this is the risk of using this model. So if you are there aside, playing aside with this guy, then you can be the editor that is sober and use the drunk guy to be very creative and produce a number of things. But there must be someone on top of the guy that controls what they are doing and, you know, make sure that everything is done correctly. Okay, and now I come to another part of the talk because the problem is the following. So, okay, here there is a joke that maybe you can take a look at. But before talking of causal inference, my point is that maybe we should say a couple of words about how ChatGPT, GPT-4 are trained. Maybe you don't know that, but the way in which these neural networks are trained is super simple in the sense that you have them read everything that there is in the internet, and the researchers that trained the network were hiding some words in the phrases here and there randomly in these texts. And they were asking every time ChatGPT to predict the missing word. And then eventually they showed the right word that was hidden. So in this way, ChatGPT made some predictions and then realized that the predictions were wrong, and then corrected itself, like in the images example that we made at the beginning, and so on and so forth. So just hiding words, making the guy predict, and then showing the truth, and the neural network correcting itself very, very many times. This is the way in which ChatGPT has been trained. So ChatGPT is trained to predict missing words. That's it. Stop. End of the story. So it's not when they didn't even try to put intelligence in an actual sense inside ChatGPT. They try just to have the guy predict as good as possible the next word. When you write a phrase and ask ChatGPT to complete it, it is just taking this initial phrase and predict what is the most likely next word, and then what is the most likely next word, and so on and so forth. This is the way ChatGPT works. Okay, with some additional things, but we don't care at the moment. But the main thing is this. So the main thing is that it is a predictor. It knows nothing about the word. It knows what is written in the text, and it knows how to make very nice predictions. That's it. The reason why out of this, you know, we can see intelligence, because there is, of course, some emerging intelligence, like in this fact that the GPT-4 is so good at passing a number of exams for law, for, you know, literature, for also for mathematics in some cases, in medicine. So the reason why it is so good, it is not so clear to us, because these capabilities of doing some reasoning is an emerging property of a learning that was completely focused on something else, just prediction. Okay, and the question is that there is this, let's say, original scene, which is not really a scene, but it is an original scene in ChatGPT, that it is not a model made to reason and to reason the way we reason, just a model made to predict. So what could we use to reason instead? Well, we could use causal inference, for instance. And this is a joke that, you know, contrasts two versions of the interpretation of observations. So the guy on the left is using correlation, the guy on the right is using causation. Okay, because in this case, it was being drunk that caused both keeping the shoes in bed and having a hangover the day afterwards. It was not, even though you see the correlation between shoes and hangover, there is no causal link. There is only a causal direction from being drunk and the two guys. Okay, so the problem that I would like to raise is that reasoning in a correlative fashion, just with probabilities, it is not what will lead us to actual intelligence, I think, and even the same for ChatGPT and GPT-4. For instance, and this was one of the main points of my talk, that fitting doesn't mean understanding. These are two different things. For instance, if you record for 1 year, the weather, the state of the weather, the state of the barometer, in an Excel file, you recorded these two numbers many times, that at the end, with any simple machine learning algorithm, super simple, you will learn that good weather means the barometer in a good state, and bad state of the barometer will allow you to predict bad weather. So the point is that you will be able to predict the weather from barometer and barometer from weather very well after collecting some observations, but you will never be able to understand in this specific context what is causing what. So is it the weather causing the barometer to move, or is it that if you move the length of the barometer, you will change the weather? This is not going to be possible to understand just looking at the data. Okay, so you can do fitting, you can do wonderful predictions without understanding anything of what's really going on in a certain domain. And this is, I think, what ChatGPT in a sense is doing. So, understanding, in my view, means having a causal model of the world. So, but the problem is that all machine learning is about prediction, is not about understanding, because we don't have the capability, more or less, until now, to deal with causal models. So artificial intelligence doesn't talk cause and effect, or starts talking, but it's not mainstream at the moment. Another example, but maybe I'm cutting a little bit the example, it is very similar to the previous one. It's called Milton Friedman's thermostat. It's by Nobel Prize Milton Friedman, Nobel laureate. And in this case, okay, I'm really cutting this short, but the idea is that if you fix the temperature of your house and the temperature stays constant, like 20 degrees, you will see no correlation, of course, between this and external weather, this and the furnace, because if the temperature is fixed, it cannot vary with anything else. So if you do a naive analysis, like an econometrician could do, is look, what happens is that if I increase the temperature in the furnace, the external temperature, the weather will go down. Okay, of course, this is not cause and effect, but you could do something like this. So again, if you want to understand this, you need to have a causal model. Okay, this was just an example to see that causal inference is starting to find its way through econometrics. This is a recent paper in a very nice, important journal in economics. So, which is a very conservative community, but still, these ideas start spreading. Okay, this is an example of Simpson's paradox that I'm sure you know very well. In this case, you collect data about people. Every circle here is a person, and we measure the amount of exercise on the x-axis. So this guy here is doing a lot of exercise. This guy here too, but at the same time, this guy is having high cholesterol. So, it seems from this picture that the trend is the more you exercise, the more cholesterol you have, which we know is not really the case in practice. So one thing that we can do is to stratify by age. If we stratify by age, we see that we have completely the opposite behavior. So in every age group, like 50, 40, 30, you have exactly the opposite trend. So the more you exercise, like here, for instance, the less cholesterol you have. And this happens inside all the age groups. Okay, in spite of having this across all the age groups, when you forget age, the trend reverses completely. But this is a serious problem if we want to take action, right? Because in this case, it means that if you use this model, then of course we recommend to do exercise to lower your cholesterol. But if you use the other model, then we recommend to stay on the sofa and watching television. So the problem is that when we want to take actions based on our models, having predictive models is not enough. And again, we need to have a causal model of the world, because it's only through a causal model that we can know the effect of our actions. Okay, so what is the problem? The problem is that this is called the ladder of causation. You see, the problem is that we are here, rank 1, so lowest level, association, and this is all where all statistics and machine learning is. So this is the box related to all of statistics, where we say, you know, if I see something, what should I think? But if you want to go up here and say, if I do something, what happens? Or even better, if you go to the upper layer, you know, here the question is, if I had done something, what would have happened? This is called the counterfactual. Okay, in run 2 and 3, you need to have a causal model of your domain. So if you stay at the association level, so probability, correlation, machine learning, statistics, then you are not going to be able to answer questions here, and especially here. And this is the theorem. Okay, so finally, I have this application in palliative care. I've been telling that we need a causal model of the world. So what is a causal model of the world? It is something like this. It is a causal graph, just to start, in this case, about patients that are terminally ill due to cancer. So they have symptoms, they are aware or not that they're going to die, they have a preference about whether dying at home or in the hospital. There is awareness of the family. There is Karnofsky, which is a technical index about the state of the disease, progression of the disease, preference of the family, where the person should die, you know, whether or not it was in the hospital some time ago. And Triangolo is an association that delivers of volunteers, essentially, that delivers care at home. And of course, if there is Triangolo, it is more likely to some extent that the person will be dying at home instead of in the hospital. Okay, so we took this causal graph. This was drawn by one of our collaborators, essentially a nurse, in a paper, and she has a lot of experience about the problem because she's just paying visits to these patients. She is part of Triangolo, and she drew this network based on her experience, and then we collected data about like 120 people that unfortunately died, and then by these numbers we were able to fit probabilities behind the network that you are not seeing, but they are there. And then we did causal analysis. To do causal analysis, you need to do a graph like this. You need to do a few other things, but essentially you need to have data about the observed variables and the causal graph like this. If you have this, you can, for instance, compute a probability. This is called probability of necessity and sufficiency, which is weird. If you do probability, you will realize that this is not really normal. So the probability that there is death, so a certain person, fixed person, dies at home if we do an action, like providing volunteer support by Triangolo, and the same person will not die at home, so die at the hospital, if this action is not done. So Triangolo is not given as a support to the patient. The important thing here is that we do the action that is opposite, so providing Triangolo and not providing Triangolo on the same person. Okay, and of course this is impossible in practice, right? So it's like you cannot experiment one thing and the opposite on the same person. And this is the reason why we say that it's really personalized care, not just like, you know, we hear frequently that personalized care is done in a certain way. This is really personalized because we do hypothetical actions on the very same person, just one thing and the opposite. And you can do that only if you have a causal model, actually, because this is based on counterfactuals. Okay, but if we have this model and the data, we can compute this probability, and we can compute it for all the variables that we can act on, which is Triangolo on the one end, then awareness of the patient, so we can talk to the patient to make the patient aware that death is approaching, and family awareness, the same thing. So there are these three nodes on which we can act. Okay, and the result is this. So Triangolo produces an interval of probabilities. So if we impose and not impose Triangolo, we have an interval of probability between 27 and 35%, which means that the probability that the guy benefits from the Triangolo action is this. And so this means that there is about 30% of the population that would benefit from Triangolo, and if Triangolo is not imposed, would not benefit in the sense that would die at the hospital. Family awareness is here and patient awareness is here. So in spite of the fact that the problem is underdetermined because there are intervals of probabilities, because we cannot assess completely the probabilities due to, you know, these are limitations of causal models very often because they are incomplete, they are unidentifiable problems in statistical terms. In spite of this, you see that Triangolo is still the best action to take because the lowest probability is 27, it dominates the upper probabilities of the two other guys. But we can also do more. For instance, we can say that Triangolo, the data we have collected are from Triangolo, and we can say that that was not a random sample, that maybe there was a selection bias. So we are assuming, in the fact that there is probably some selection bias, we are assuming that the patients that reach Triangolo are those that are in greater need, so they are in worse condition. So we make this additional assumption. This will enlarge the intervals because we have a biased sample from which we would like to make inference about the overall population, and this increases uncertainty. And still you see that the intervals enlarge, but at the same time, Triangolo is still dominating family awareness, still dominating patient awareness. So under these conditions, selection bias, and so we still are able to say, look, Triangolo is the best action to do, and we can help 30% of the people in with a very definite measure of personalized palliative care. Okay, so I think I have to hurry up. So okay, there are many causal problems that we cannot solve with traditional statistics, you know, because very often we need to do counterfactuals, like in this case, additive interventions, you know, more or less the same that we saw recently with Triangolo. And especially problems of discriminations, evaluating gender-blind hiring practices, all of these things are based on counterfactuals, even in our natural language, so we need causal models. Essentially, we need causal models every time we need to understand the effect of actions, and also to give credit, to give responsibility, and in a sense, you know, all the problem of ethics revolves around having some causal notion of our problem. And this has also been recognized, for instance, very recently, 24th of February in Nature, and they more or less say what I've been saying so far, that AI needs to understand consequences. So, you know, imagination and regret through counterfactuals. Okay, this is one of the founding fathers of causality, Giuseppe. There are others, but definitely Giuseppe is one of the most well-known, Turing Prize. And this is his book, one of his books that is very nice to read. So if you want to take a look, I think it's a very nice read and very divulgative. And that's it. So I'm concluding. Okay, my point is that AI at the moment is taking society by storm. If you want to have an image in your mind, it seems like the arrival of the internet in '95, but with a speed that is faster, probably. Like the speed of video games. No, imagine the evolution of video games from the 80s to now. This is what is happening to AI in a very accelerating pace. I don't think we are ready for this, and most likely this will cause a number of disruption of societal habits. Okay, we have had a number of them in the past, like with the Facebook and the iPhone and so on and so forth, and now is the turn of AI. We have to take into account that this is not actual intelligence as we mean it, but it is still intelligence. So it is not human level intelligence, but it is still some kind of intelligence, and we have to face it. And for this reason, we have to be on top of the innovation if we want to drive this in a nice way for the good, let's say. We just cannot stay waiting for, you know, news from maybe other countries. And I think we need to invest for this reason. Stopping AI, I don't think it makes sense. What makes sense is investing and give it the status of a critical strategic asset. So I think Switzerland, as many other countries, should say AI is a critical asset. Let's invest it, let's study it, let's control it, but we need to spend money for this. And I'm done. Thank you, Kerstin. Sorry for being late a bit.
Thank you so much for that very interesting presentation. I wanted to take, I think we're going to be finishing on time, or maybe a couple of minutes over, if that's okay for you, Marco. So we wanted to go into the Q&A section. So I just wanted to start with asking about, you know, the causal model that you start with when you do your causal inference. I recently viewed a talk that said the exact same thing that you said, that you really need a causal model of the world, and that, you know, it's very easy to model things in a game because you know exactly what effect there is to every cause and vice versa. And the person who was speaking at that other talk was speculating that maybe AI could look at the literature and come up with a causal model. And I sort of wanted your opinion on that, knowing that the causal model might change by context, right? So the beautiful causal diagram that you presented to us that was prepared by a professional nurse is very specific to Switzerland. But yeah, what do you think of that? Could AI come up with a causal model by itself without human intervention?
Yeah, I definitely think so. Maybe without going too much into details, the problem is that if you learn, you can learn causal models from data, but there is indeterminacy in the sense that, this is well known, you can have two different causal models that produce exactly the same distributions in the data. And this is the reason why the problem is not identifiable. So if you start from data and try to go back, you will find more than one causal model. So you will only be able to partially identify a causal model. And this is one limitation. On the other hand, you can do experiments, as we do when we are children, for instance, or in the lab, in order to understand causal relations. And even more, I think, is exactly what you were saying, just checking the literature, checking Wikipedia. Now, there are lots of facts. There is all human knowledge since, 3,000 years ago in Wikipedia. And we have been collecting lots of causal knowledge there. So if you were able to use AI to extract this knowledge from there, of course, we would have lots of models. Then we should, join them and this and that. But this is maybe another story. But in fact, we have already started doing that, because now if you use ChatGPT, if you use GPT-4, you can ask the guy, what is causing what in this description of the problem? And they will most likely tell it. So, maybe they don't identify everything, but if you ask the guy, and I've been asking ChatGPT to see how he reacted, and actually was finding a number of causal relations in the story that it itself had produced before. So we could, in principle, just ask ChatGPT, okay, list all the causal relations in this text that you find, and then we use them to create a causal graph. And we could systematize, maybe not perfectly, but we can start systematizing all our knowledge that is in text now into causal graphs. When we have that, we can do lots of wonderful things. I think that partially, implicitly, ChatGPT is already doing this, but not really systematically, and we cannot trust it in the sense that when you see that it reasons in a nice way, he is using also some form of weak form of causality. But I've been telling you that we need a causal model of the world, and ChatGPT has only a surrogate model of the world, which is text. So he knows, in fact, they're called language models. So they model the language and not the world. And the problem is, can they have a good model of the world only through the language? Probably yes, but you need to understand the language, not just predict the language. So by prediction, they have a right to something. Now we need to have them do another jump up, another quantum leap in order to extract more useful causal knowledge. I think this will happen for sure. But there are also other possibilities that maybe, by using much bigger neural networks, this will happen by itself. I don't think so, but, at this point, really, I don't feel like excluding anything, because it is accelerating so fast that everything is very surprising at the moment.
Okay, well, that's interesting. If you just ask ChatGPT to give you a causal model, and again, as you said, based on text that's already available, I would be curious to see if, because there's some published literature that's clearly using biased methods or outdated methods, and ChatGPT won't know, but maybe it will, I don't know. I do have a question on Mentimeter that I wanted to ask you. So the question is, the potential for an AGI to explode into a super intelligence, and then there's an arrow and it says Bostrom, is assuming a self-amplifying enhancement of cognitive processing power. How could a language model be able to improve itself?
Well, it's difficult. I'm not very, let's say, I don't know if to say optimistic or pessimistic, but the question is that I don't think it will happen very soon, but it's very difficult to say. So I don't, language models are just based on predictions, as I was saying before. So until they do this, they fill this gap of causality in a model of the world reasoning, I don't think they will go there. Of course, we have to be careful at this point, because this thing of ChatGPT has surprised everybody, and you saw GPT-4 has increased a lot now, the performance. And then you can use GPT-4 instead with a window of like 800 words of text as buffer. You can use a buffer of 32,000 words now. It's already available, and already it is better than before. So, it's very difficult to understand what's going to happen. Now there are, I've seen a couple of papers that, to be honest, I haven't read yet because it is going so fast that I cannot keep up with the pace. But two recent papers that in particular try to analyze the performance of the causal performance of ChatGPT from text. And it is a kind of lukewarm. It's not excelling that using causal knowledge. And for instance, also the programming competition in which it was not excelling was one of the worst things in a sense, in showing that the reasoning capabilities on very specific tough things is not good. It's good at conversation. It's not good at solving hard problems. So I think we need more, but maybe it's going quicker than we expected before. Maybe there is a possibility. I don't see the possibility with language models. But of course, we have to be a bit careful with that. But the risk more than AGI, as Gary Marcus was saying, is AI risk. Sorry for Novax guys here, guys, but we saw the Novax guys and the mess. We saw people that believe that the Earth is flat. And this was before ChatGPT, that you can invent lots of stupid things. So if people are not critical about that, we can have very bad consequences without AGI.
Couldn't agree more. I think in a way there is the argument, does it even matter if it really thinks by itself, or if the impacts on society are there, will be there, we're there. I read somewhere provocatively that maybe ChatGPT might be extracting some meaning maybe from code as well, that it's reading some sort of causal representation of some processes. Who knows? I don't know what you think about that. And apart from that, I want to thank you for raising the urgency of making it a priority in Switzerland, of course, with the aspect of funding. But not only for that reason, but because it's absolutely central, it's absolutely present in the European policy making, and we should have a seat there. Do you have any final consideration maybe on policy and policy making in the realm of AI, or more than what you've already said on your final
slide? But it's more or less the same. It's more or less the same story. I think there was a short interview that appeared on NZZ recently, a few days ago, about it, and I was saying something that more or less is the same idea. So I think we should, it's time for bold decisions, where bold decision means, comparing AI to a strategic and critical asset. We should not underestimate the power of AI, as many other countries are not doing. And we should invest. We should invest because it is a matter of our wealth, our competition, our well-being, our society, also making people aware of this technology, increasing the competence of, laymen about AI. There are many things that we can do. What I would not do is to let things go by themselves, okay? Because it would be very myopic in my view. And Switzerland is rich, and I think it can invest, in a coordinated fashion about the study and control of AI.
I agree. Yara, any last words?
We do have a couple of more questions on Mentimeter, and I wonder if we have time to get to those, or is that... So another question is, do you think a causal model could be incorporated into an AI without physical existence, aka body, and will it be necessary to raise an AI like a child or trainable fast?
I don't know if I understand correctly the question. So without a body, so having an AI with causal information, causal reasoning capabilities, and if this could grow like a baby.
Yeah.
I think, okay.
Sorry, go ahead. I was going to say my interpretation for the second part, not the first part, is if it's possible to train AI in stages. So instead of just teaching it something big, I'm thinking of the example you gave of reading the manual, where.
Actually, I think so. I think that, okay, I don't want to go as far as saying that causality will be sufficient for AGI, but I think it will be necessary for sure, because we all reason causally. We don't reason in a correlative fashion. We also are very bad at estimating and dealing with probabilities as humans. Instead, we are very good, since we are young children, toddlers, and so even babies are dealing with causality. So causality it gives meaning to the world. If we don't have causality, there is no meaning. For instance, okay, it's a bit controversial in the sense that physical laws are not really causal if you think about that, because they are symmetric. There is no direction, no, apart from maybe from the second law of thermodynamics, but every law is symmetrical. So physical laws are, in a sense, are correlative more than causal. Causality maybe is an emergent property, it's not even a fundamental property of the world. You know, causality arises when you split the world into observer and observed. If you take everything together, it is just a blob of correlations of probability, you know, like in quantum mechanics. So causality maybe is not even a fundamental element of the world, it's just emergent, but it is this emergent that gives meaning to us. Because also we are emergent beings in this world, you know, out of chemistry and, you know, quantum mechanics. And so we need causality to deal with these things. And I think, you know, if you want computers to understand us, if you want to be able to talk to computers as we talk to other people, we need these guys to understand causality very well.
There's one last question, if that's okay. It's although from a technical point of view, the limits of LLMs are clear prediction, their societal impact or their subjective perception is quite big. How can we close this gap? So there's a misunderstanding, that is the gap that I referred to. That there's a misunderstanding between the limits of LLMs and the impact that they're having on society, because people aren't aware of their limits.
Yeah. I think that, okay, as I said, there is this gap in the sense that, okay, Gary Marcus put it like this. So it's a meeting of two average intelligence. He was saying actually not the average, but average in a pejorative sense. No, median or, you know, intelligence. So the average median intelligence of ChatGPT and the average intelligence of the average person, let's say, you know, that is not very critical, you know, and so on and so forth. So the meeting of these two average intelligence is the problem. I think that, you know, one is talking like if he knew the truth, and the other is listening as if this guy is correct, you know, and this is a problem. So we have to be critical. We have to understand how these systems work a little bit, at least. You know, when I was doing my driving classes many years ago, we were given also some knowledge of the engine, you know, and never going to become, you know, a garage operator, you know, repairing the engine, but knowing how the engine works gives you an idea of how you can control your car. You know? And it is more or less the same. If you know something about ChatGPT, you know what you can expect. You feel in control. If you know nothing, you know, you can believe everything. And so it is even more about critical thinking. And perhaps this is an opportunity, because since students are using ChatGPT, whether we want it or not, and younger and younger students too, we can use that as a gym to train them to do critical thinking, you know, which is something we don't teach in the classrooms. And then, okay, but this is my usual obsession. I think we should insist a lot on the scientific method and science. You know, it's not taught so much, the scientific method, but it is the most important thing we created, you know, since the Hellenistic era. So I think we really need to keep that as one of our founding values of a Western society. So the possibility to have the scientific method in our hands, you know, and you know, treat it with respect.
Thank you so much. I think those are the questions that we had from the audience. I don't know if anyone wants to add anything, and I'll hand it over to you, Kirsten.
Well, I think we're through the questions. Thank you for this very, very nice presentation. And it's very timely, I think, with everything that's happening these days and the political, societal debate. You've given lots of people food for thought and some tools to think, and some reading as well, some reading assignments. So with that, I want to thank you very much, Marco, for your talk. Looking forward to further collaborations and exchanges. But for today, I'm going to wish you all a very nice weekend. Thanks again. And from
thanks to you.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you very much.